Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into some fascinating source material.
We are. We're looking at excerpts from Joy Buolamwini's book, Unmasking AI.
It's quite powerful stuff. This is all about, well, her personal story, but also her really groundbreaking research into algorithmic bias.
Exactly. It's this mix, isn't it? Her own experiences, the hard research, and then this call for algorithmic justice.
So our mission today is basically to pull out the key insights, understand her journey and why her work is so pivotal.
Let's do it.
Okay, so her background. Right from the start, it's pretty unique. Born in Ghana.
Yeah, and her mother was an artist, her father a scientist.
That mix, art and science, you can feel it throughout, can't you? How she approaches things.
Absolutely. Her mother exploring human conditions through art, her father using neural nets for, drug discovery, asking questions of colors versus cells, as she puts it.
It sounds like her dad's work, seeing those abstract software images, first got her interested in machines.
Yes, but the real spark, the moment she decided her path, that was earlier, maybe around 9.
Seeing Cynthia Breezeal's robot, Kismet, on TV.
That's the one. Kismet wasn't just an industrial machine. It was about connection, emotion.
Mesmerizing, she calls it. And that made her want to go to MIT, right, to build robots like that.
Yeah, become a robotics engineer. That dream really set her off into computing, learning Java, understanding algorithms, those step-by-step instructions.
And that path eventually took her to Georgia Tech for her undergrad, still focused on social robots.
Right. Working with a professor who'd actually studied with Cynthia Breezeal, her project was Peekaboo Simon.
Aiming to get the robot to detect faces, play a game. Simple enough, you'd think.
Uh-huh. But this is where she first really bumped into it personally, what she later calls the coded gaze.
Trying to get the robot to see her face.
Yeah, her darker skin. And it
Yeah.
it wasn't working consistently, even with good lighting.
But it worked fine for her roommate.
That's her lighter skin roommate, yes. And she notes it wasn't even the first time cameras had failed her like that, thinking back to old childhood photos.
Right, where you can barely see anything but eyes and teeth sometimes.
Exactly. But with the robot, it was direct feedback, though at the time, she says she just focused on getting the project done, didn't, dwell on the why too much.
But it clearly stuck with her. Because then when she gets to MIT for grad school, fulfilling that childhood dream.
She takes this class, science fabrication, building fantastical tech.
And she creates the Aspire mirror, inspired by Anansi the spider, using face tracking.
And all this time, that first semester, she has this white mask she bought for Halloween sitting on her desk.
An ever-present reminder, she calls it.
A reminder of those earlier face detection problems. A physical symbol of this coded gaze.
That discomfort, it didn't go away. It came up again in another project. Upbeat Walls.
Upbeat walls, right, where faces controlled digital paint strokes and sounds. Very cool idea.
But crucially,
It had the same problem, like the Aspire mirror prototype, like Peekaboo Simon before it. It worked best for lighter skin faces.
why? Was it her code?
Well, she notes the underlying software libraries she was using, they just weren't optimized for darker skin tones. It wasn't just her code, it was the tools she was building with.
Wow. Okay, so then she takes this Upbeat Walls demo out in public to an art show at the MFA in Boston.
Yes, and this is where it becomes really stark, really public.
The same pattern.
Heartbreakingly, yes. Lighter skinned people walk up, boom, face detected, music plays. Darker skinned people, they're waving, jumping, nothing.
Until the white mask.
Until they grabbed that white mask she'd put on the table. She hadn't even meant it as a tool for people, more symbolic. But they grab it, put it on, and suddenly the system sees them.
And the comments she overheard.
Oh, they were powerful. Someone fair-skinned just saying, maybe innocently, it works so well for me, I didn't even imagine it wouldn't work for someone else.
And the flip side.
Someone with darker skin, just that mix of frustration and maybe resignation, saying, dang, the machines can't see us either.
Wow. That hits hard. That implies a whole history of not being seen.
Exactly. It crystallizes it. This isn't just a tech glitch. It's systemic. It's affecting real people, reflecting other societal issues.
So, okay, those experiences, seeing it happen to others, that must have been the catalyst for her research focus.
Absolutely. She decided to dive deep into AI systems, analyzing human faces, especially as they were being used more and more law enforcement, for example.
She mentions the terminology being confusing too, facial recognition, face matching, detection.
Right. So she adopts facial recognition technologies, or FRT, as a kind of catch-all, but emphasizes The different tasks matter. Detection is not the same as identification.
So her first step was testing the big commercial systems. IBM, Microsoft, Face++.
Yeah, running her own photo through them
And the results.
pretty much confirmed her earlier experiences. Stark.
Yeah.
Some systems couldn't even detect her face in the photo, just couldn't find it.
And when they did,
Often misgendered her, labeled her male, and tended to guess her age as much younger. So basic attributes, totally wrong.
which is deeply concerning for systems supposedly ready for real-world use.
Very. So naturally, she thought, okay, I need more diverse photos to test this systematically, but finding diverse data sets, that was a huge hurdle.
The open source ones were mostly...
Celebrities, white faces, male faces, skewed.
So she had to look at the benchmarks, the tests researchers used to rate their AI.
Exactly. She zeroed in on LFW-labeled faces in the wild, a really common one.
And her analysis showed.
Just how skewed it was, like 77.5% male, 83.5% white, building on prior work, but really quantifying it. That's where pale male data sets comes from.
Even the newer ones meant to be better, like NIST's IGBA dataset.
Still skewed. Maybe slightly better, but still like 75% male, nearly 80% lighter skinned according to the Fitzpatrick scale she used.
And this is where she brings in intersectionality, right? From Kimberly Crenshaw.
Yes, a really critical move. Instead of just looking at gender or skin type, she looked at where they intersect.
And in that IGBA dataset, the intersection revealed.
That lighter-skinned males were almost 60% of the benchmark. But women of color, only 4.4%. Just tiny representation.
Which means, what for accuracy score?
It means a system could completely fail, like 100% error rate on all the women of color in the data set.
The group in the darkest shadow of the coded gaze.
And still get over 95% overall accuracy, still look great on paper, still be deemed suitable for the real world.
That's staggering. It just completely hides the bias.
Totally. Overall accuracy is not the whole story.
Yeah.
And she links this to power shadows, how societal biases, patriarchy, white supremacy, ableism, they get baked into the data itself.
How does that happen?
Well, think about how data is collected. If you use public figures, who gets media attention? If you collect pedestrian data, do you capture people using wheelchairs or canes? Those choices reflect existing power structures.
The caribou are not kangaroos. Analogy makes sense here, too.
Yeah, context collapse, train a system in one place, say on Fortune 100 board members, then deploy it somewhere totally different, like a diverse neighborhood. It's likely going to fail.
So for her own research, she needed a way to classify people for testing, but wanted something more objective than race.
Right. She chose the Fitzpatrick scale classifying skin type based on reaction to sun exposure. It's a phenotypic measure, more about physical characteristics.
But she acknowledges that even that has issues.
Oh, yeah. Any classification system involves choices, power. Who defines the categories? What are the boundaries? It's never perfectly neutral, but it was a more objective approach for her specific research goal.
And then she had to label her data set herself, using this scale.
Painstaking work. And uncomfortable, she says, explicitly putting labels on strangers based on skin tone. It made her really aware of the power to label.
It also raised ethical questions for her, didn't it, about using public figures' photos at all?
Yes, even though it was common practice. She questioned using images without explicit consent, comparing it to how companies like Facebook use user photos for training. This was before GDPR really took hold outside Europe, which requires more consent.
Okay, so she builds her own benchmark, the Pilot Parliaments benchmark. Why politicians?
Because their photos are public and parliaments offer some demographic diversity globally. So she labels these images by hand using the Fitzpatrick scale and gender.
And then tests those big commercial systems again. IBM, Microsoft, Face++ out.
And the results are clear, quantitative. All of them performed worse on female faces than male faces. Face++ had the biggest gap, over 20% difference in accuracy for gender classification.
And the skin type analysis
Confirmed her hypothesis. Performance was consistently measurably worse on darker skin types compared to lighter skin types, across the board.
This systematic proof of bias linked to skin tone in major commercial products, that was huge, right?
Absolutely. A major contribution. These were some of the biggest accuracy gaps documented for commercial AI from tech giants at that point. It wasn't just anecdote anymore, it was data.
But getting this published, even in her master's thesis, wasn't straightforward.
No, she faced skepticism. Her committee, senior academics, some questioned why focus on demographics, on bias. She really had to defend the importance of it.
Debates about how to present it, too. like showing mislabeled faces.
Yeah, she decided against showing specific mislabeled individuals, use composite images instead to protect privacy, and focus on the pattern of
Then the
errors.
question of, is it the algorithm or the data?
She concluded it's both, really. The skewed datasets create a false picture of progress, and the algorithms themselves can introduce or amplify bias. They feed each other.
But then her paper, Gender Shades, co-authored with Timnit Gebru, got accepted at the FAT conference.
Right. Fairness, accountability, and transparency. That acceptance was huge validation, adding academic weight and signaling the field was starting to take this seriously.
And IBM's reaction.
That's highlighted as a really positive outcome. They engaged, replicated her study, and importantly, released an updated model showing major improvements, especially for darker female faces.
So it proved change was possible.
Exactly. It showed that companies can improve if they audit and respond to this kind of research.
But she felt this research couldn't just stay in academic circles or industry labs.
Right. Companies weren't likely to shout about their systems flaws. The public, policymakers, they needed to know.
Which led to AI. Ain't I a woman? Blending art and science.
Her counter demo. Instead of showing off what AI could do, it showed where it failed, where it caused harm, using performance art and spoken word.
And using examples like Serena Williams labeled male, Michelle Obama's childhood photo labeled toupee.
Young Oprah with no face detected, Sojourner Truth labeled male. These weren't abstract errors. They mirrored her own experiences, but with icons making the problem undeniable.
Connecting it to Frederick Douglass, calling herself a poet of code. That took some courage, maybe.
She says she felt it was a risk, yeah. Worried it might undermine her technical credibility in a field that doesn't always value artistic or activist approaches.
But that approach clearly opened doors, like presenting at Davos, the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, talking to global elites. She used that snowboarding analogy, trying after skateboarding, falling constantly.
To illustrate.
The danger of taking AI trained in one limited context, like caribou, and just dropping it into a completely different one, like kangaroos. It's gonna fall flat, maybe dangerously so.
And then the very concrete fight with the Brooklyn tenants at Atlantic Towers.
That really brought it down to earth. Tenants resisting facial recognition in their own homes.
She helped them how?
Drafted an amicus letter, using her own research to show the likely bias in the system the landlord wanted to install. She even used the vendor's own marketing about user adoption against them.
Because the tenants clearly did not adopt it.
Exactly, and their concerns were spot on. Accuracy bias, consent, data security. Especially given their demographics, mostly people of color, women, kids, elderly, the exact groups most harmed by the bias.
And this was happening in a vacuum, legally speaking.
Pretty much. No real federal laws on FRT then. Communities were vulnerable. Her letter had support from other academics embodying that idea of design justice researchers working with affected communities.
Her research also fueled audits by groups like the ACLU.
Yeah, like the famous one testing Amazon recognition on Congress members, finding lots of false matches to mugshots. That got headlines.
And all this advocacy started leading to actual policy changes.
Amazingly, yes. San Francisco banning police use of FRT in May 2019, then campaigns in Massachusetts creating statewide restrictions. She mentions being genuinely surprised by the impact.
The momentum continued with her testifying before Congress.
Right, the House Oversight Committee, intense prep, translating the tech for lawmakers.
What was her main ask?
A moratorium on government use, at least until we understand it better. And crucially, a survey. Find out where and how the government is already using this stuff. Transparency first.
And her story, and others, became central to the documentary Coded Bias.
By Shalini Kantaya, chronicling her journey and centering the stories of the excluded, those harmed or excluded by AI.
Filming must have been intense.
She talks about the vulnerability, the long process, but believing in the mission. Humanize the harms, center the people most affected. The Sundance premiere, the black sunglasses, symbolic resistance.
Even using corporate platforms later, like the Olay campaign.
Yeah, hashtag Decode Thebes. But importantly, using it to lift up other Black femme scholars, Sophia Noble, Ruha Benjamin, and support groups like Black Girls Code. Not just about her.
And through all this, her understanding deepened, right? It's not just about fixing the code.
Exactly. That idea of selfies for inclusion, getting more diverse data, it helps performance, sure, but it doesn't fix the root problem. It's sociotechnical. It's about power. Who builds it? Who benefits? Who is harmed? Who decides? It's not just metrics, it's equity.
She uses medical AI examples to show this tension.
Yeah. Dr. Regina Barzeley's breast cancer AI, huge potential benefit if done right, with inclusive data.
But also the risk of harm, like Avery Smith's Melologic project tackling medical apartheid.
Right, building data sets for darker skin conditions and connecting patients to Black dermatologists. It addresses the tech gap and the social barriers. It shows solutions have to be holistic.
All while she's finishing your PhD mission, Dr. Justice? That sounds intense.
She describes feeling overwhelmed, yeah. Inspired by Simone Biles prioritizing health, learning it's okay to step back.
The skateboarding fantasy.
Yeah, dropping out to skateboard for Ghana.
Yeah.
But then news from Afghanistan, women hiding diplomas that brought home the value of education, the privilege and responsibility she felt.
And encouragement from Dr. Latanya Sweeney, a pioneer in this field herself.
Crucial encouragement. Finish the PhD, Sweeney urged. It gives you credibility. It makes it harder for critics to dismiss the work.
Which she did, successfully defending in fall 2021. Defending her life's work with words.
A powerful culmination. And then seeing the impact ripple outwards, like being at the White House for the AI Bill of Rights launch.
And hearing Fabian Rogers, one of those Brooklyn tenants she supported, speak there must have been incredible.
Full circle. And she got to speak directly with President Biden.
What did she tell him?
Shared the story of Robert Williams, falsely arrested because of flawed FRT. Explained the documented bias against darker skin, women, elderly, Native Americans, backed by research.
And gave specific recommendations.
Yes, the need for that baseline survey of government AI use. Considering a moratorium, biometric rights, stopping TSA using FRT for domestic flights and mass surveillance, concrete steps.
The wider discussion there touched on other big tech issues too.
Like gene editing with Jennifer Doudna, the need for ethical guardrails on powerful tech. The call was for investment in AI for everyone's benefit, not just a select few.
So despite all the challenges, the harms she's documented, she finds hope.
Yeah, but interestingly, she says her hope comes less from the machines themselves and more from people, from human perseverance, creativity, collective action.
So quite a journey we've traced through these excerpts.
Yeah.
From that initial coded gaze encounter
Through the rigorous research quantifying bias in major systems.
to using art, advocacy, impacting policy, speaking truth to power.
It really covers the spectrum.
And the key takeaways for us, for you listening, it's the reality of algorithmic bias.
Definitely. And the need to question the supposedly neutral standards, the classification systems, see the power shadows they carry.
Understanding how data collection itself shapes the outcome. The difference between just fixing bias metrics and actually fighting for algorithmic justice, which is about power and equity.
And the power of humanizing it all. Using stories, art, centering the people affected, that's what drives change.
Which leaves us with those big questions the source material poses, questions for all of us, really. Are we okay with a few tech companies holding this much power over our lives via opaque algorithms?
Are we going to actively work towards a society that protects everyone's rights in this AI age? Do we believe we actually have the power, individually and together, to shape this future?
Or do we just accept what's given to us?
As the book suggests, the answers, well, they're really up to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Data Podcast for Nerds. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you want to transition your career and become a data professional, follow me on LinkedIn for even more tips, tricks, and nerdy fun bits.